All right then, welcome to the MSC podcast number 10? No, number 2 of the year. We'll call it that. We'll stick with that. So all four of us this week, we're going to cover a few topics. So we're going to start off by talking a bit more about the recent blog that Luke wrote on veganism. So we'll dive into that a bit, and then I'm sure we'll just go from there and see where the conversation takes us. So yeah, Luke, why did you choose that topic?
I chose that topic. I think it's a very prominent one at the minute. I think people following a plant-based diet, or at least being aware of how many animal products they eat, is definitely on the rise. So, and also that coincides with January, everyone doing Veganuary. And also I think that when people talk about like the vegan diet, they automatically talk about game changers, which is something that someone commented in the post straight away. So I was between two subjects, but I thought this one would be a really good one to do. And I also really like the study layout and how it was set up, because a lot of the times, which I'm sure we'll talk about later when we're talking about research, there's a lot of things are put in to elicit a certain response. Like they put up with like the two extremes of something to compare to see the effect it would have. While this was a very typical diet, it wasn't 100% meat, like they were just eating beef every day for the omnivore diet, and for the plant they were just eating like grass or whatever. It was a very much a realistic diet, so everything was controlled. I think the omnivore diet, they're eating 70% animal products and then 30 plants or something around that percentage. So it was like a very realistic comparison. And I also think it gave really good direction for people that were looking to start a vegan diet. I think a lot of people worryingly do say, oh, I'm worried it's going to affect my training. In particular, the drop from being a vegetarian to vegan, it does get more difficult. So I think it had some clear takeaways for people to have that they could just apply to their diet. And yeah, I thought it was just the perfect time to do it.
Decent, yeah. Have you ever gone vegan yourself, or gone like vegetarian, or tried it at all?
No.
Or has anyone like Mark?
No, I haven't.
No.
This is the one group, but that's another reason why. Like, we intentionally chose like a clickbait title, because we thought, we thought people that, we post about food and it's a big steak or a big chicken. Like we are omnivores. We like eating meat. So I thought automatically put that headline up. Like Ian Snape automatically thought it was going to be a bad thing, I reckon. And I've quite liked it because I think it was quite subjective. So I think that's what it was also good to do, because we are all omnivores. I have thought about it in the past. I would never go completely vegetarian. I've been at stages aware of like trying to cut down on meat ever so slightly. More like I think pescatarian would be like swapping meat for fish from like sustainable sources. I don't think I could probably drop any lower than that, but fair play to people that do. But it's not for me.
Would you ever
Sorry, what I liked about it was it was unbiased. It was fair, and I wish like more articles and more online posts and social media and conversations were like that, were kind of factual based, and then like, here are the facts, here's an opinion, like, and take from that what you want and make your own choices. It wasn't trying to shove something down your throat one way or the other, which is what I really liked about the article.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to sell anything either, like, because a lot of opinions on.
I mean, you look at like exactly. You look at like I coach quite a lot of powerlifters, and off the top of my head, there must be at least 5 or 6 that are vegetarian. There's a couple that are vegan, and like it's good to have some good information for them to say, because I mean, all things being equal, it's a lot easier to be an omnivore, but as things are like progressing through time and it's getting more popular, there are more options. Like you look now, Subway released a chicken alternative. So like even Subway, all pretty much takeaways and restaurants now have a good vegan menu. A few years ago, I went to London with Navta, who's someone that I coach, and we went to a restaurant and there was no vegetarian option. So I had a steak and she had a bowl of ice cream for her main. And that was like 4 years ago. So comparatively now, that would never happen.
Yeah.
There would always be a decent option on there. And it's not just like the same meal without meat. I think it has progressed. So it was nice to give them, that was at the forefront of my mind when I was writing it, and give them more information about like how to apply it and how they can cover the bases. Because people do get worried about not being as efficient as people that meet, and they might see it as like a a detrimental diet, but it doesn't have to be if you apply things smartly.
Yeah. It's also like, because I've never done like vegetarian or anything like that. But what about like the cost comparison? Did you look into that at all? Like, say like a week shopping for a vegan, is it a lot more expensive? Is that because that might be a reason why people tend not to go for it?
So it's funny because, I mean, I don't know. I've not looked into any research that looks at like people that eat high protein vegan versus not. But one of the stats when they talk about trying to, like, on the vegan, I can't remember the page, but the Vegan Society, I think it was, and they compared the price, and it said that a meat diet is like £500 more expensive for the year, around that. So they're saying actually that eating meat is more expensive, but that's not people that are going to be making decisions to try and eat a high protein diet. The people that would just like stop eating meat and would eat just maybe the vegetable side of things. So I'm not sure of anything that like compares high protein vegan versus. Interesting, in the study, it said that the best source of protein in terms of like amino acid profiles and digestibility is fungus protein, so stuff like corn, as a higher full complete amino acid profile compared to like the plant alternative. So it seems that actually like choosing those is better, and I think that's probably, I don't know if it's cheaper, but I know that corn's not like massively expensive compared to like minced beef.
I guess it just depends on the quality of the meat you buy, and then the
of course,
the quality of the veggie stuff you buy as well. Oh, cool. Okay. Have you ever like directed any of like your clients or anything to go vegetarian or vegan or anything like that? Or would you?
I'm sure Sonia has.
No, I haven't personally. I think like you
makes you say that.
I haven't personally, but you know, I like people to make their own choices, and I think we're, you know, the modern day world, we've got the luxury of choosing to be vegetarian or vegan if we want to. As Luke says, like things have progressed quite a lot in the last few years, especially. So, you know, I think as a coach, like we spoke about in the last podcast, like you've got to get an understanding of your client's personality and lifestyle, you know, as a part of, you know, how to coach them in a holistic manner, you know. So what they're doing outside the gym, we talked about step counts and things like that, and I think it's the same with nutrition. So you're going to have some guys who are like, right, I've been a lifelong vegan or vegetarian, and the last thing I'm going to do is try and say, well, actually you should eat meat because there's a better quality of proteins, amino acids, etc. And it's the same the other way around as well. If someone's like, you know, I'm from the countryside, so you won't see too many vegans and vegetarians. And like, if you've got, you know, if you're trying to say to someone who's eaten meat their whole life and say, well, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. You know, in my opinion, that's not really the way to go. And you know, from a moral perspective, but also from a perspective of making too big a changes for someone. You know, we speak about nutritional coaching and making small changes and small steps. So the last thing you want to be doing, in my opinion, is to say, right, well, I'm a big believer in, you know, in you know, veganism, or you know, meat eater, whatever it is, you know, and not trying to force that down someone's throat, but getting an understanding of where they're at and give advice as to, you know, right, okay, well, how, you know, I'm a vegan eater, I'm worried about, you know, making progress in the gym, and then just having the information there, like Luke said in his article, of right, this is what you can do better. And if you're a meat eater, you're not the devil, you know. It's like, right, okay, this is what you can do. You know, you're eating some really good meats there with great nutritional value. However, your fat content's a little bit high, so maybe try and swap in this. So you might have someone who says, okay, I'm a bit conscious, like Luke was saying, like, you know, if you're a meat eater but you're conscious and you just want to cut down a little bit, what are the alternatives? So I think it has to be a subtle and progressive approach.
So when you
can I just follow on for that quickly?
Yeah, go on.
So pretty much what Mark exactly said. It's if people are making a decision on their own bat, you give them the information that they need to take away with. And the difference lies, I think, is if someone says, I want to switch to being a vegan because I think it's going to increase my performance, or if they're doing it for a different reason apart from ethics. So if it's I'm doing it because I want to cut down on my meat, I'm aware that I'm eating a lot and I think it could be a good thing to do, then you give them the information to take away and say, look, this is what you need to do. This is the data that we have on the vegan diet. If someone comes up to you and says it's not because of ethics, it's because I saw Game Changers and this guy was an amazing footballer and he was on a vegan diet, then you give them the information to say, look, if you want to become a vegan, fantastic. However, this is the research on that. So I think depending on the way that people come, the majority is because of ethics, but occasionally you'll get someone that's watched something and then will say, oh, well, actually, I'm going to eat chicken nuggets because Usain Bolt eats chicken nuggets. And then you give people the proper info.
Was he a terrible footballer and then changed to vegan and became an amazing footballer?
He had 2 vegan meals and then he got drafted for the NFL.
So when you get people who are like, like you say, really adamant that you should go vegan, or whatever nutrition approach they think you should, because let's say they cite some research and say, look, this is the results they got, so therefore you should do it. Where do you draw the line between applying the results from like research into sort of a practical situation? So like in the study you talked about, Luke, in your blog, it's like, where do you draw the line with the inferences you make from the results?
So like you look at the study was done on like older people. It was done on like 50s plus. It was, they trained one leg and not the other. And then they looked at the difference in the muscle protein synthesis compared to that. And then they compared it to the other group. So because it's so invasive, you can't do a long-term study of something like that. Like to look at like muscle protein synthesis is quite an invasive thing. You can't do it for long periods of time because people just won't commit to it. So from that, you look at that and you think, okay, so the diet was like a legit diet that people would follow. But training one leg comparatively to the other is not. It's a decent way to look at muscle protein synthesis, but we just don't do that. So I think you can look at research and then you have to look a little bit deeper. A lot of people read the abstract and then that's it. But if you look a little bit deeper at actually what the study says, there's then more takeaways to get from it. If you come away from nutrition for a second, like it's a bit easy to explain for like a training one. Yeah. One of my favorite studies looks at like the recovery timeline of high volume versus high intensity. And the protocol that it uses is absolutely ridiculous. It's done to elicit a response. It's something like, it might be like 10 sets of 10, 80%, which I don't know who the fuck can do that, but I wouldn't get one set, versus 10 singles at 100%. And it's like not one person who I know that's trained for more than 3 months could do that workout. And then they look at the time course for recovery and like, oh yeah, it took them longer to recover from the 10-10s first. And it's like, no one's going to do that. If you compared 4 sets of 6 compared to 3 singles, it might be different. But it gives you an idea that maybe, okay, the higher volume session is going to be slightly longer to recover from than the higher intensity. And that can then help you set out your training program where if you like squatting twice a week, you might do like a higher intensity followed by the higher volume rather than the other way around. But again, like you've got to look at the caveats and say, no one does that protocol, but there's takeaways from it.
To expand on that, like that was going to be my next point, was like about reading the abstract. So I mean that's target number one, is actually to do a bit of research. So that's better than nothing. A lot of people with with sports science, strength conditioning, and politics and things like that will read something on Unilad or whatever, or just read something online and just be like, oh, so and so said this and so, and that's just literally someone who's biased opinion. Yeah. That's not even like, there's not even research. Don't take that as scientific, quantitative data and just sprout it as the gospel. So we've got to do a research, and then that's your next level. And then you do your research and it's like, oh, I've read this abstract and it says that, whatever. It says whatever, 10-10s is amazing. And it's like, okay, actually look into, like Lee says, look into the subjects, look into the length of the study, the amount of subjects, the type of subjects, the actual protocols as well behind the research. Like there's an example there of whatever 10-10s and singles and things like that, and that's really important as well. So like step one is actually do your research and don't just sprout shit. And then the second thing is let's actually look at the research and look a bit beyond
Get the context.
the abstract. Let's get some context from it and go from there, really. Because I think
people. Do you think? Oh, go on.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's pretty.
Do you think people, they do take, like you say, whether it's a politics or nutrition or some sort of trading research, and they tend to just focus on the title because it is just that so much easier. Because if you have to dive into every single thing, who's got time in their day to do that for every decision they make? Do you know what I mean? It's a very time-consuming process. So, do you think it's a shame in a way that people are cashing in on that because they know people will just look at titles and clickbait articles, so they know people aren't going to do further research, so it's just so much easier for them to just infer.
It's a very time-consuming thing to look at all the research that's done every single month, and that's why we pay for a subscription that condenses all the research down. It explains it, the clear bits that you all need to know from an impartial thing. And it's so valuable, because otherwise you're just looking through millions of articles every single month. But like you said, you need to read everything. You need to look at the full. The big one is like the participants in the studies, because there's no money in sports science comparatively to like other studies. So you're just begging people to take part in these studies, and often at times like they've never trained, or they've trained for like 3 months. You try and convince, like Sonia will know when she's trying to do like a master's, and yourself trying to get someone to commit to like a 12-week program. It's hard, man, because if you already train, like I'm not going to stop training for 12 weeks to do your training program, but like Dave, that's never done a training program in his life, if you're offering 12 weeks of free training, he'll absolutely jump at it. So straight away, that's your market for sports science, and that needs to be taken into account as well. If you look at these studies all the time, it's like they've gained 60% on their lift, and it's like that's never going to happen to any. Because they've got no lift to fucking begin with.
Yeah,
it's hard, isn't it? I think like with like you say, it's really hard to like condense all the articles, and like I say, who's got time to if you're not a if you're not employed or educated in that subject, who's got time to filter through all those articles? We should, because it's it's our job, our industry. But you can see how the modern the modern way of things, and attention spans being a bit lower, and like everything that's available on a phone and Instagram, things like that, with headlines and clickbait and stuff like that.
Answers, don't they?
You can see how the average person will just digest those headings and those kind of 1-2 liners, rather than actually looking into things and doing research themselves. It's much easier just to say, and that's in strength conditioning, that's in nutrition, that's in politics, that's in anything, isn't it? Is like, right, well, I've seen that on Instagram, I've seen that, not doing your research. And and then there's a Netflix documentary, and it's like, for the modern day person, it's a lot easier to sit down and read that. So it is difficult. It is difficult for people, I think.
Sonia, when you're doing your like research for your degree, have you found it hard to like recruit participants?
I think it's hard because you need to have the group like controlled or as similar as possible.
Yeah.
But I really liked how you digged into it with saying like, when you like a coach and actually look into what type of participants that was and what was their training like, that's what kind of we see, like that's what we read, that's what we're interested in when we read an article. Like, like you straight away know that this was done on like elite footballers or elite rugby players. So okay, I'm gonna question if it's gonna apply to my clients or my athletes, and this is the same. So like it's really, really tough to find a similar group like with similar training, or like because obviously then you don't want to have such variety. Like someone does powerlifting and then you have someone who just do a regular gym. Like that's a big difference. So, and as you said, like there's no money, so literally people trying to get anyone into those studies. Like, and I think the big one is that athletes don't have time to give you 12 weeks of training. So that's where you need to be really careful when you're reading who was the study done with and how was the study like applied. Like that's big one, and that's I think as Ben wanna like talk about evidence-based coaching. I think that's where you got to start question what the coaches claim. Like most coaches like say, well, this research says, but then when we read it, we know that there's a difference. It's like the Game Changers, the Netflix document. Like we know there's a bit more behind, like the bias, like what money was into it, and so
Like it's just
you can't just believe something you see produced in this mass way.
Yeah, if people cite some study and it confirms their pre-existing beliefs, then
bias, yeah,
they're not going to look into like the contents and nuance if it could potentially like hinder what they're actually saying.
Because I think the issue now is that so many people like say, well, but the research says, and they just started to use the word research and science, but well, what science is it actually? Is it rubbish? Like you have to still be critical about this research, because not every research is good and not every study is valuable. Yeah. So, and that's probably on
levels of there's definitely levels of research in terms of like, when they do like a single study versus when they do a longitudinal study versus when they do when they compare all the data through like 10 articles.
Or like a second literature review or meta-analysis.
A meta-analysis, yeah. There's definitely levels to it. And people will scout like, I read this one article or I saw this one thing.
Yeah.
And then you can always trump that by saying, well, actually the meta-analysis says this. Because you'll find a study that will back up your biases 100%. And if you're impartial, then that's that. One thing I do like a study when you talk about like different people for what the research is. There's a really good study, and I've spoken to Mark about it a billion times. He's like doing the acute power-based session before like a volume day, and the study is done on like team sports. I think it was footballers again. It was like doing a vertical jump and then going into like some strength work the day after, but it was based off increasing your performance on the football pitch. But then you take those characteristics and you think, how could that apply to my sport? So we know it's going to apply for team sports because force production is going to be higher the day after. But will it apply to, which my primary concern is strength training and powerlifting? Does it apply to weightlifters? So you can take like the overall look of the subject. You've got to say, okay, it's not based on my demographic, but do the principles apply? And then you apply it yourself. You try it, and it might work for some, and it might not for others. But it gives you something to kind of explore a little bit further if that's something that you want to do.
That was going to be my next question, actually. Like, obviously, you're a very high level athlete. How often do you sort of look at the research and adjust your training protocols? Do you like say, I don't know, every 3 months have a look and adjust, or do you do it weekly, or what do you sort of?
I pretty much never adjust my like I'll try little things, but I won't because this is the whole thing about if you've got your own kind of belief and you've got your own research, then there's not going to be one article that ever comes out that's going to make me change my whole belief system. I'm not going to be currently doing something there and say, oh my God, this says that singles all year round is definitely the best, because I've already got my belief system and I've already got what I know works and I've already got a good amount of understanding, and not once full swing is going to swing it around. However, like a few years ago, I tried the power-based session before I did a competition, or before, not on a competition, sorry, but I did it before like a heavy session, see if it works, see how I felt the day after. And then I thought, okay, that was pretty good. I'll apply that to when I do a competition. So like, rather than like a complete overhaul, because I've already got my beliefs, and that's the key with anything. If no one's already got their full understanding, they get swung around by every single piece of research that's come out. Like one week they're saying this is the best thing, the next week they're saying something else is the best thing. If you already got a good understanding, you're already fully read, and you've applied it yourself, you might change a couple of little things, but you're not going to have this complete overhaul. So I think like having your own belief system avoids you doing that. But I'm more than open to the new research and then applying little things to it, but it's never going to be like a complete overhaul. And I think that's the same for anyone. Like there'll be new research that comes out in like team sports, like people tracking like tonnage and people tracking like their mileage that they're winning, and then like trying to stay within this like acute chronic ratios is massive at the minute. The last 2 years, 2 years ago, no one had done that, but it's not like a massive overhaul. It's just applying something to what you already do. Does that answer what you?
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that you don't. Like you say, you've got your own case study being yourself, and you just adjust here as you go. That's good.
But it's the same with clients. Like I try to 30 odd people, and there'll be a new research that comes out and says this could be superior to this, and then you have a look into it and you think, okay, the principles might apply to these people. let's give it a try. But it's not completely changing all of the training. It's applying a very small change for an extra couple of percent. And it's these little tweaks rather than like a complete overhaul, which is what the research is going to dictate.
Interesting. The meat. All right. So sticking with the topic of nutrition, do you think it's important that everyone track their calories at some point or consistently? What's your opinions on that, Sonia? What are you thinking?
I think that it would depend on the specific person's goal, whether it's like, if it's performance or if it's just like feeling good, like losing weight or fat loss, basically. I think it would be probably good and beneficial for everyone, kind of go through a period where you have some idea of what meals and what food, like how many calories they have, because I think this is a big one if people never actually look into the labels. Because like you often maybe hear from your own clients, like I've only had this and I've only had that, but when actually like it's a lot. So I think like having just like a basic knowledge of like what you're consuming is good. And then I think from the perspective like performance and like taking your training to another level, probably for a while, I don't know, like I know like myself and Luke, I know like he's doing it like almost all the time, but like when you for let's say a week or for a holiday period don't track, like you already kind of know how much to eat. So I think it teaches you how to behave and how to cook and how to eat. So I think it's vital. But maybe again you gotta be careful because people can get trapped into being too skeptical about, like I don't know how to put this in my fitness pal. I'm not gonna eat it. So again, you gotta like have that line in between what's healthy and what's
avoid certain foods because they can't track it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna eat out. I'm not gonna go, like I'm not gonna have this, or if someone brings a cake or whatever, like keeping these things, like I think that's not good for the mental side of the thing. But to give you an overall like opinion and idea of how much you eat, if you people say I can't lose weight, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, like I just eat salad, but then they forgot, let's say, to add the dressing like into the fact that that's the calories. So hope it answers the question.
I think exactly what you said. So like, depending on your personality, depends on what level that you need to go in for. Because there's some people and they've got like really disordered eating, and like can become like quite obsessive with stuff like that. And you see them like weighing like every single item, like how many grams of tomato, even though it will only be like 4 calories difference if it's 100 grams or 4. So depend on the personality, depends on how much you ask them to track. So for some people, it might just be a case of saying, like, rather than tracking calories, say aim to have a fistful of protein and 2 vegetables with each meal or something like that. But I do think that aside from disordered eating, if you haven't got any like past with that as an issue, you need to track at some point. So we had a guy through the elite membership that said he's used a calculator recently to work out what his calorie deficit should be, and it was like 1,800 calories, which is quite low. But the calculators are based purely off averages. So what I think we all agree with as coaches is that when we get people to start a nutritional program, is to track themselves for a week, track their weight, kind of for a male, it's very easy because you can just track their weight. There's very minimal in terms of fluctuations from like a hormonal perspective and from the cycle. And then you can just see if they've lost weight through that week or if they've gained weight. And then from there, you can manipulate the calories. But I think the ultimate aim is then to become as kind of intuitive as possible for the majority of people. And there'll be times where you have to go back into eating and tracking your calories all the time. But for most people, they want to get just to an intuitive point. So I track every single day, but I pretty much just like it at the end of the day and make sure there's no massive errors. And I pretty much eat now within 50 calories every single day. I log very half-assed, like I don't weigh anything. Well, I do weigh, I don't weigh like salads and stuff. So I think the aim is to get as intuitive as you can. But everyone needs to track at some point to just get an understanding of what their body responds to. Because the calculator could say 1,800, but this guy might actually need 2,200 calories and still lose fast weight. So I think you can use the calculators to get a starting point, but ultimately tracking and then comparing to your own activity levels is vital.
Happy days. What about you, Mark? You tracking
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. I think it's something that everyone should do at some point because it gives you an awareness. And it can be quite eye-opening, to be honest. I mean, I didn't do it, at all until probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was probably the first time I did it, and it was quite eye-opening, to be honest. As much as I thought I knew about, nutrition and calories and things like that. It was, I did learn. There was a few things that took me by surprise. So I think it's worth doing for everyone, just for at worst, just a little bit of awareness about what you're doing. Not saying you have to go and track every day for the rest of your life. For me, it's on and off. Like, I'll go through periods where if I'm aware that, like, I want to just make some subtle changes, body composition, or if energy levels are low or performance levels are low. So I mean, there was a period last season before games where I was just felt really tired and stuff, and I went back into, like, just actually looking into what I was eating. So I started logging for a bit, and I did see one or two things that I was missing. So it's context, I think, like, and for, right now I'm not tracking, but I've just become aware recently that, like, my protein levels have definitely slipped off, like, probably in the last, like, 3-6 months, to be honest. It's been sloppy. So that's something that I'm consciously trying to improve. But I'm not feeling the need to track it at the moment. I'm just trying to make a more conscious effort. And then I might track again for a little bit, but I'm not in a weight categorized sport. So I'm not like a kilo or 2 kilos here and there. I'm not too fussed about. I've got a good understanding now of, like, pretty much what I'm on daily now. But you got to go through that kind of process and do it on yourself to build that, that understanding and those learnings.
If someone,
I also think for the majority of people that you don't need to track every single macronutrient. You can just, so for most people, if it's just like from a aesthetic perspective, it's just a protein target and an overall calorie target. You don't specifically need to track your carbohydrates and fats, as long as there's, like, some kind of balance there. But if someone's then looking for the next, like, 3%, like I'm trying like a higher carbohydrate diet. Similar to what you said about the research earlier, there's some good research out this last couple of months about, like, higher carbohydrate diets, in particular in and around the workout, and the effect that can have on, like, calcium handling and then also force production. So I'm trialing now a higher carbohydrate diet. So I'm tracking every macro for the first time. I won't do it forever, but it's just to kind of get that extra 2-3%. But for the majority of people, they just need to track their overall calories and then have a protein target. So it doesn't have to be as obsessive as maybe people think.
That was going to be my next question, actually. Like, if someone was coming up to you starting out, it's all right. Like, what would you say with the top, things to focus on initially? And like you said, protein and overall.
So there was a really good meta-analysis by Brad Schoenfeld, and it was looking, and I think he's the leader on this subject, and it's looking at, like, the amount of protein that you can absorb per meal. And people always start out saying, 25 grams, 30 grams, and it doesn't take anything into account. And I think actually the research is 0.4 to 0.55 grams per your kilo. So if you weighed 100 kilo, 40 to 55 grams. And then the overall target is 1.6 to 2.2 in terms of maximizing, like, muscle protein synthesis. So you can break that down there. So for 100 kilo guy, 160 to 220 grams of protein a day, and divided by meals between 40 to 55. So if you do 50 grams, if you have 5 meals at 50, that gets you, is that right? 4 meals at 50 gets you 200 grams of protein. Quick maths. So I use that as a good. For older people, I think it's slightly higher, but like for most people that we work with, is between 0.4 and 0.55, separated over like 4 to 5 meals, depending if you aim for the low or the higher aim. And I think that's a really good starting point. But like Mark said earlier about not just completely overhauling someone. So if someone's on, like, I don't know, 30 grams of protein, you're not going to say, well, actually, we need to put it up to 2 grams per kilo, because it's just not going to happen. But just slow incremental increases is the key. And I think the protein is the main one.
Nice. So does it frustrate you when you see things online where people like are so adamant about a certain either nutritional plan or training plan, where they give such, like,
black and white?
Yeah, black and white, like, this works, this definitely works. Does it really frustrate you? And if it does frustrate you, where would you sort of direct people to look? elsewhere to get better? Because obviously, you know, general population aren't going to look into every research article on training or nutrition because, you know, it's not, like I say, there's only a finite amount of hours in the day. So where would you direct people to look to get the best information possible?
I'll just jump in there. I think like with, you know, it's not the average person's job to know that and to do that. So ask an expert, get in touch with an expert. I think it's the same in any subject really. You know, is go and find someone, you know, with experience, well researched and well thought of in a particular industry, and try and learn from that person. Would be my first thing I would say. Yeah.
I always tell people just to be wary of the extremes of anything. So like, I'm on this 0 carb diet, or I'm on this, you know, ridiculously high protein or super high. Like, all of the extremes are where the issues are. The middle ground tends to be what is best for most people. However, I don't get frustrated anymore at anyone, because you'll get nowhere in life. Like, someone comes up to you every single day and gives you some bullshit that they've read, and you just can't let it bother you unless they are a client, or if they actively ask you a question about it. If someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, the keto diet is the best. I've lost this amount of weight." It's fantastic. Have a good day. If someone says to me, "Luke, I want to get coached by you. I'm on a keto diet. What do you think?" You just give them a little bit more research. There's a few different people out there that are good to learn off. But I think, like Mark said, just going to someone that's reputable, like fairly local. I think it's good to work with someone in person, and someone when you can see that like the information they're putting out has good research in it, but also like they can back it up with clients that they've actually made a difference with. Because it's easy having all the research, but if you can't apply it to your clients, something's getting lost in translation, or you're not good at communicating it, or you can't make people buy in. That's massive as well. So I think you need to have a look at who's putting out good content and who's actually getting good results.
Yeah, nice.
I think it's easier, like it's an easier sell for people, isn't it? You know, you're going to get these influencers, and you're going to get these people that are trying to sell something that sounds trendy. It sounds like a quick fix, you know, whatever it is, a 5-2, a keto, or give it a cool name, and you'll try and sell that particular product. You know, sounds a bit sexier than like the basics of nutrition,
fundamentals. Yeah,
I think the good one is that, like, if you're saying that if someone would approach you as a coach and then say like, "I'm on this diet, what do you think?" Like, I would genuinely just ask like, how do you feel it works for you? Like, does it actually suit to your, you know, your lifestyle, your body? Like, people may be thinking like, "I'm doing it because I've heard it's good," but when actually you like try it, which is fine, I would probably say if you want to try, but then if it doesn't suit you, why would you push for something like that? Like, many people were like buzzing about keto when it came out, I think, with like the CrossFit boom, and I think like genuinely people figured that it's just not okay, like it's just not good for everyone.
Most aerobic sport in the world, let's not eat carbs.
Yeah,
it's like intermittent fasting. If I tried that, it would be terrible. But for someone that trained fairly early, it might be a really good diet.
Yeah.
Who was the person, Mark, that was winding up Jackie the other day? That Greg. He lost loads of weight, and he's put out a diet video, or he's put out like a diet plan. And he's like a presenter of like a.
Is he a cook? Chef, the one from MasterChef.
Yeah, the MasterChef guy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think you've got to take a long, hard look at yourself if you're buying the diet plan off Greg. Yeah. Comparatively saying, who did Greg's diet plan, or, you know, maybe look at the coach versus the celebrity. Greg Wallace.
That's it.
If you're going to Greg Wallace for your nutrition, you should probably have a long, hard look at yourself.
Yeah.
Versus saying, what did he do, and who's the guy that, you know, who was his trainer, who was his coach?
Yeah.
It's a bit of critical thinking, isn't it? I think, which is maybe a bit difficult these days, but
that's true. Well,
it's context, isn't it? Middle ground, and trying to, you know, fad diets, quick sells and things like that. I think your best option is for longevity. Get yourself educated, get some help off someone who knows what they're doing, and find what works for you.
Yeah. So it's like inferring anything from a research, what were the mechanisms that caused the effects, and how can you apply them to yourself in your context or in your client's context or anything? Yeah. Well, what better way to end than on Greg Wallace? I think that's a finishing point. Happy days. All right. Well, until next time, we'll
Thanks, Ben.
see you again. Yeah, good chat today.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, cheers, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.